Most large-scale conflicts don't begin with a single dramatic moment. They build through gradual escalation decisions, reactions, and pressure points that compound over time. This morning may represent a shift in that pattern, not just another headline, but a possible turning point. In this video, I'll break down 5 indicators that suggest the situation could be moving into a more dangerous phase. Before we go further, a quick note. This isn't rumor or internet theory. What I'm about to walk through is based on reported developments and official signals just spread out across headlines in a way that's easy to miss. So take a breath, stay with the facts, and watch how the pieces line up. Sign number 1 starts with the initial strike. By multiple reports, the US and Israel carried out a coordinated operation against Iran planned, targeted, and large enough to signal a strategic shift, not a one-off exchange. The claims include specific operation names, launch points, and a wide set of targets tied to military and nuclear infrastructure. The important point here isn't just what was hit, but what that scale implies. This wasn't a warning shot. It was an escalation. And then comes the event the narrative treats as the real point of no return, the reported killing of Iran's top leader. In this framing, it isn't just another battlefield loss. It's a direct strike at the core of the state, with huge symbolic and political consequences. The argument is that if that report is accurate, it changes the calculation overnight, because you're no longer talking about a limited exchange. You're talking about an escalation that can pull in Iran's military capacity, its regional network of allies, and the broader question of how far this conflict can go. Iran's response, in this telling, wasn't delayed or limited. It came fast, across multiple fronts. The section describes retaliatory strikes and launches aimed at US and allied positions in the region, alongside a broader wave of drones and missiles that spread the conflict beyond one border. The point being made is simple. Once attacks and counterattacks start landing in several places at once, it stops looking like a contained incident and starts functioning like an active regional war in real time. Sign number 2 is about the Strait of Hormuz and why it matters even to people nowhere near the Middle East. This section explains that a huge share of the world's oil and gas moves through that narrow passage, so any disruption there doesn't stay regional. The claim being made is that the strait is effectively being choked off through threats, military posture, or direct interference, and that even the risk of closure can spike energy prices, rattle markets, and trigger shortages. In other words, it's presented as a pressure point where one geographic bottleneck can turn a conflict into a global economic shock. Sign number 3 shifts the focus from a regional exchange to the wider balance of power. The section argues that Russia and China aren't treating this like an isolated Middle East crisis. They're moving in ways that suggest alignment, coordination, and preparation, including joint military activity and public diplomatic signaling. The point isn't that they've entered the war directly, but that their posture can change the incentives for everyone else. It hardens blocks, narrows off-ramps, and raises the risk of miscalculation. In that framing, the danger is a familiar one in history, multiple powers taking manageable steps until the situation becomes unmanageable. Sign number 4 focuses on capability and the danger of underestimating it. This section pushes back on the idea that Iran is too weak to sustain a serious fight, arguing that it still has depth, stockpiles, hardened infrastructure, and weapons designed to complicate interception and response. It also frames the nuclear issue as a pressure multiplier, because as the stakes rise, so do the incentives to move closer to a deterrent. The takeaway is that even if the odds of a worst-case outcome are low, the consequences are so large that treating it casually becomes its own risk.
Sign number 5 brings the conflict closer to home. This section argues that even if the fighting is happening overseas, the consequences won't stay there because modern conflict spreads through cyber attacks, infrastructure disruption, and targeted threats, not just conventional battlefields. It references official warnings and heightened alerts as signals that security agencies are treating spillover as a real possibility. The core point is about proximity. When governments start preparing the public for downstream impacts, it's a sign they believe the risk has expanded beyond the region itself. So, where does all of this leave us? This section steps back from the momentum of the 5 signs and tries to draw a clear boundary between what's happening now and what world war would actually mean. It argues that the situation is already serious and escalating, but that a true global war depends on specific thresholds. More major states entering directly, sustained strikes expanding beyond the region, or a nuclear move that forces everyone's hand. It also notes how quickly public narratives can swing into panic, prophecy, or propaganda, and warns against letting emotion replace analysis. The closing message is essentially a civic one. Pay attention, track the facts, recognize the escalation markers, and don't treat this as background noise just because it's happening far away.